A very good afternoon to all of you present here. Welcome to the webinar Heritage in the Asia Pacific, Nature, Culture and the World Heritage Convention. I'll just take a couple of minutes to lay out some rules because we have many participants, and for all of those who are online, we will request you to stay on mute, and any questions you have are welcome to be shared in the chat. The panelists themselves and the speakers themselves will try to address them on air or maybe in the chat as well. So would make that request for everyone to join in. And we have been joined by Director of our Institute, Sri Virendra Tiwari as well. Welcome, sir. And with that in mind, I'd like to just give you a brief introduction. So webinar, as you can see, is titled Heritage in the Asia Pacific, Nature, Culture and the World Heritage Convention. Heritage represents important intergenerational legacy. And in the Asia Pacific in particular, it is a well-known fact that nature and culture have been intertwined, and there is a lot which we can learn from this region of the world. And we are lucky to have an extremely varied group of panelists who will be speaking about the various sub-regions, and we hope to make this a fertile ground for active discussion on how World Heritage Convention will help preserve heritage as a whole, and how in particular Asia Pacific can show the way. With that, I would like to request Mr. Nehru Prabakaran to kindly speak a few words.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. It's a great pleasure to finally initiate this particular webinar, and it's really exciting because we really had a great number of participants joining in very soon, and we had registrations, a lot of interest coming across the world from the North America to Australia. So all across the continent, we had participants registering for this workshop. Of course, it's well planned and laid out with a nicely arranged number of very good expertise, people with a lot of expertise on this heritage, as particularly from the Asia Pacific region. And we're really looking forward to have this webinar because this can also foster collaborations for future work on heritage within the Asia Pacific region and overall at the global level. So without spending more time, I like to invite our director, Sri Virendra Tiwari, Director, Wildlife Institute of India, and also Director, Category 2 Center of the UNESCO at the Wildlife Institute of India, for his welcome address and opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Nehru. Thank you. So first of all, greetings from India to all of you. It's my pleasure to welcome you all from around the world to this webinar on heritage in Asia Pacific, nature, culture, and the World Heritage Convention. There is growing recognition of heritage conservation both as an academic subject and as a management mandate in national and international agenda. UNESCO and the 50 years of the World Heritage Convention have, of course, played a significant role in this development. Though heritage is broadly classified into the two main groups of natural and cultural heritage, the interlinking between the two domains is evident, particularly in countries of the Asia Pacific region, imbued with the culture of coexistence between the people and nature. Drawing to these Asia Pacific conservation culture is of immense importance and applicability to countries around the world at a time when our natural and cultural legacies are at great risk and are seeing rapid change. India, like other countries in the region, is blessed with many ancient cultures and biodiverse locations, sharing the same landscape, making it an ideal candidate to understand how heritages link one to another. Heritage also offers several opportunities for collaborations with institutions and leading experts from a wide variety of fields, some of whom have been invited to speak as part of today's event. In this regard, the Wildlife Institute of India hosts a Category 2 Center of World Heritage under the auspices of UNESCO, which can play a key role in facilitating such dialogue between diverse stakeholders. I look forward to some interesting talks in this webinar from UNESCO Paris, Philippines, Australia, and India, and an engaging discussion with heritage experts. So I wish you all the success for this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your welcome address. And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Ruchi Badola, Dean, Wildlife Institute of India, for her special remarks.
Thank you, Nehru. Namaste. Greetings from India to everyone. I'm very pleased to be a part of this webinar on nature, culture and world heritage, which is being anchored by the UNESCO Category 2 Center at the Wildlife Institute of India. And I'm even more pleased to actually see the participation of experts and participants from all over the world actually in this workshop. As you're well aware that this natural heritage as well as cultural heritage is a very, very important part of the Asia-Pacific region, which has, I think, about 290 World Heritage Sites today, out of which 206 are cultural and 72 are natural, whereas 12 are mixed sites. Now, one of the highlights of most of these natural heritage sites particularly is that they are mostly found in developing tropical countries, whether they are in the Asia-Pacific or in other parts of the world. And they are also representing the very, very strong linkages between the culture, the local people's requirements, as well as the development aspirations of the countries and the regions where they are located. In the Asia-Pacific region, particularly, the cultural sites represent the intricate relationship between the history and culture of the people who live here. And the natural heritage sites are the mainstay of our lives and the ecosystem services that they provide for the well-being of human beings. Now, just as an example, if you look at the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, in 8 countries of the Asia-Pacific region, itself actually has 2,000, in fact, more than 2,000 ethnic communities who inhabit these regions. So imagine the kind of culture, tangible and intangible, and the heritage that would be housed there. So some of the culture and heritage, whether it is natural or heritage or the cultural heritage, it is there as part of the World Heritage Convention, but some of it is yet to be given that recognition. So I think it is on us as managers, as academicians, as practitioners, as well as the managers of this World Heritage Convention, as well as the Category 2 Center or the other center in Paris, that we need to recognize these sites. We need to build up the capacity of the different stakeholders to ensure that the whole process of inscription to the World Heritage Convention, which is quite a long procedure and it is a very thorough procedure. So we should be able to understand the entire process of being able to inscribe these sites for the World Heritage Convention and at the same time retain the integrity of these sites as World Heritage Sites, because as of today, what I read was that 6 of the heritage sites in the Asia-Pacific region are in danger. And these dangers can come from anything from the rapid urbanizations to climate change, then unsustainable development, as well as conflicts, which could be both armed and political. So all this kind of challenges are there, and in face of it, we have to conserve these sites, and we have to have more and more sites under our listing. We also have 6 transboundary or 8 transboundary sites in the region. That is a very interesting aspect because today's conservation scenario calls for transboundary cooperation. And what better cooperation can happen than for conservation of heritage, whether it is cultural and natural. So I think it is a part of the, it fits in into so many of the future goals that humanity has kept in, for itself, as well as the global biodiversity framework, which is now being adopted. So it is a part, and fulfilling requirements for this World Heritage Convention will enable us to meet many of our requirements, both as being parties to signatories to several of the conventions, as well as fulfilling the requirements for the present and future generation for conservation of both cultural and natural heritage. My best wishes for this webinar, and I hope you have a very fruitful and engaging discussions today. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, madam. So with that, I hand it over to Anuranjan to take the proceedings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prabakaran, and thank you so much, Director and Dean, Wildlife Institute of India, for those very important words. I would like to acknowledge a participant from Brazil because I believe it's 5 a.m. in the morning there. So thank you for joining, and it's a privilege, and we hope that our webinar will be of interest and value for you. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for the day. It's Ms. Himalchuli Gurung, who is the Chief of Unit, Asia Pacific World Heritage Center in Paris. Ms. Gurung has been with the unit, has joined the Chief of Asia as the Chief of Asia Pacific Units in 2022. Prior to this, she served as Cultural Program Specialist in various UNESCO offices in Nepal, Indonesia, Jamaica, and China, in the promotion of culture of sustainable development through the implementation of integrated operational projects. She represented UNESCO on the governing boards of Category 2 centers in the field of intangible cultural heritage in China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea from 2016 to 2022. With that, I would request Ms. Himalchuli Gurung to begin her presentation. Ma'am, would your office be sharing the presentation then?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mr. Anuranjan, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Namaskar. Bonjour, thank you so much for inviting. And first and foremost, I would like to really commend the Category 2 Center, the Wildlife Institute of India, for organizing this very, very important webinar. It's the year end, but still all of us are busy preparing, finalizing, but we took this opportunity because this is definitely a very, very important initiative. And my first one officially joining from UNESCO headquarters in Paris from the World Heritage Center. So first, thank you so much, Director Mr. Tiwari and Dean, Wildlife Institute of India, for your inspiring opening remarks. And I really, really appreciate the emphasis that both of you made in terms of culture, heritage, nature, and community. And this is very important, particularly for myself coming from the field, having worked for almost 2 decades in the field with UNESCO, and now at the headquarters, we see the linkages between culture and nature, just not with culture and nature, but also with the tangible and intangible, which we call the living heritage. So this was really, really a good topic that you have selected. So my presentation today, I will not go, I had prepared an overview of the World Heritage, but I'm gonna go very quickly because I think there are a few items I would like to highlight. And given the next slide, please. Given the importance, next. As you know, for the World Heritage Convention, I'll just briefly give an overview of the convention. It's ratified by 195 state parties, and the most recent one being Tuvalu, which ratified in May this year. So we have 195, Tuvalu from the Pacific. As you know, the convention, it's OUV, Outstanding Universal Value under the 1972 convention. But I also highlighted, you see the two highlighted part, I put it in transmission and safeguarding. And this is really, really related when you're talking about living heritage and communities. Without the transmission, there's no point of safeguarding. And for safeguarding, you need to transmit the knowledge, the know-how, either it be identification, protection, conservation, presentation of cultural and natural heritage. Next slide, please. I don't think I have to go into detail. Most of you know already the World Heritage System. We have the World Heritage Committee with 21 member states, which meets every year, once every year. And then we have the General Assembly of the State Parties, which meets every other year in the sideline of the UNESCO General Conference. And we do have UNESCO World Heritage Center, which is the secretariat for the 1972 World Heritage Convention. And if you see the trend in the growing number of sites, currently we have 1,199 properties in 168 countries. And if you look at it, we just started with 12 World Heritage Sites. So I will leave our dear participants to know which are these first 12 World Heritage Sites in 1978. Okay. The next slide. And just to give you a quick look at the number of sites from the Asia and the Pacific, the first batch of sites were inscribed in 1979. I repeat, 1979. This is just the first decade of the convention went into effect in 1972. So there we had 5 sites. First batch from Asia Pacific were 5. Total of 5 sites, 2 from Nepal and 3 from Iran. The second batch was in 1998. Interestingly, there were 3 sites from Pakistan in 1998. And the third batch, 1981, again, total of 5 sites, 2 from Pakistan and 3 from Australia. So just to give you an idea how we started in the Asia and the Pacific region. World Heritage in Danger List. We already mentioned that we have 40 cultural and 16 natural sites on the danger. From the Asia and the Pacific, we have 4 cultural and 2 natural. However, looking on the percentage for the Asia Pacific, we carry about 11% of the total number of sites that are in danger. Next slide. SDGs, I don't have to repeat. All of us, we know SDG goal 11 and particularly target 11.4, which says make cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And target 11.4 emphasizes and strengthening efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. And of course, when we talk about culture, it also cross-cuts other SDGs, not just 11.4. I would like to emphasize, as all of us, most of us know, the 5 C's. That is the strategic objective of the convention. 5 C's, I don't have to repeat, but I would really like you to emphasize on the 5th C, which is communities, which was added in 2007, Christchurch, New Zealand. Okay, so it's important thing to note when we talk about 5 C's, the 5th C's was only added much later to this convention. So then today's focus, as the opening speakers have already highlighted communities and indigenous people. So the World Heritage is often located. Why we are talking about communities? Because World Heritage sites, cultural landscape, nature sites are always with communities living in and around these sites. So it's very important that we talk about, and I'm very happy this is why we emphasize this was an important conference looking at not just the World Heritage Convention, just the list and listing mechanism, but also on how do we emphasize bring nature, culture, and communities together. So for the I will just give you an overview. The largest, we are Asia Pacific is the largest geographic region, and we are the second largest in number of properties. And also the reason for Asia Pacific, as we all know, it's rich cultural and natural diversity in the region. Large majority of properties inscribed are cultural sites. And this is another thing I want to highlight, particularly in the interest of our Category 2 Center, the Wildlife Institute of India. We have more cultural sites than natural sites. So we need lots to work on it to bring the balance. And then also, Asia Pacific has the largest number of natural and mixed World Heritage sites. So it gives you more work, right? And also 9 state parties who do not have any inscribed World Heritage property. And so I would just like to flag it out. So these countries 9, Bhutan, Brunei, Darussalam, Cook Island, Maldives, Niue, Samoa, Timor-Leste, Tonga, and Tuvalu, the last one to inscribe. Okay, I would like to take this very quick opportunity of this workshop to just present on our periodic reporting exercise, which was successfully completed, the 3rd cycle of the periodic reporting. During the exercise was carried out during our challenging time in 2020-2022, and which the report was presented at the last committee in Riyadh in September. And this periodic reporting exercise has come up with an action plan. Okay, and I will flip it. I will not go into detail, but I will just go quickly to the key. Maybe we can skip in. Maybe we can go to the main outcomes. Slide 14, main outcomes. Yes. So they were like looking at the periodic reporting exercise, main factors affecting the property. I think that's important. 60% of were positive factors, whereas 40 were negative factors. Most common positive factors, as you say, management institutional framework. Most of the sites in the Asia and the Pacific, they had proper management institutional framework already in place. Social, cultural use of heritage, service infrastructures were in place for most of it, and building and development were also some of the key factors under this for the World Heritage sites. And most common negative factors were, again, local conditions affected physical fabric, climate change, severe weather patterns, and sudden ecological, geological events and pollution. So these were some of the highlights. Next one. So we will go into the action plan. This is a very important thing created because this action plan was not just a World Heritage Center preparing this. We facilitated, but participants' inputs were provided by all the national focal points. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the WII for their active participation during this whole process, during the periodic reporting exercise in Asia Pacific, together with the national focal points, site managers, and also the advisory bodies, together with our field office network. So it's an action plan with 34 actions organized according to the 5 Cs, again, important. And this is, again, the responsibility of the sites or the member states. Of course, however, many member states in the Asia Pacific would need assistance from institutions, various institutions, the university, Category 2 centers such as WII, the ABs, the field offices. So we put all our effort together, and then hopefully we can continue working together in realizing this action plan for the Asian Pacific. So one of the requests, or I would like to take this opportunity, is also for WII and other institutions to take this forward, this action plan, to popularize this action plan and guide this action plan. And we, from our side at the World Heritage Center, are also doing this, the initial introduction of this action plan. It was presented during the World Heritage Committee in Riyadh, and this has been adopted by the member states. And we also have our mid-cycle. Mid-cycle for this would be in 2027, as this goes until 2030, together with the SDGs timeframe. So now very quickly touch upon linking tangible and intangible heritage. I didn't know that most of you might know that UNESCO, we do have a convention, culture convention, which is the 2003 convention for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. So there's another whole convention. So I will not go today on this intangible, but maybe the WII could also take another opportunity on when you do a next webinar or meeting on also talking about this 1972 and the 2000 Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention and looking at the synergies, because this is very, very important. And I just gave you a very quick rundown on why the linkages between tangible and intangible, which is the living heritage, important, because it reinforces synergies between the tangible sites and the people and communities living. When we talk about intangible living heritage, without the communities, there's no living heritage. And it also, the intangible and tangible, if you bring them together, it gives them a sense of belonging for the local communities. That, of course, these sites are ours, and we benefit from these sites, and not just the sites for the tourists. And also reinforcing crafts and products. I specifically mentioned this here, saying because crafts, making craftsmanships are the living heritage of the communities, and which might enhance improving their livelihood in a sustainable manner. I just like to share, when we're talking about how are we going to integrate living tangible heritage and intangible, this is an example that I was personally engaged in when I was in Beijing, UNESCO Beijing office, for East Asia. We had this project funded by a private sector, which we went to 4 World Heritage sites, tapping on the living heritage, intangible heritage of the local communities. And when we say living heritage, the knowledge system, the craftsmanship, such as embroidery, weaving, bamboo craftsmanship, and honey raising in some of these fascinating sites in China as a pilot activity, and engaging the local community and packaging these products as a creative and cultural industry for sustainable livelihood. So just to give you a quick rundown on this one. So having spoken about World Heritage and living heritage and the communities, I would like to just very quickly share with you this very important initiative spearheaded by UNESCO, which it's called the Naples Conference. We had a very, very productive 3-day conference in Naples, Italy, just last month in November, which brought the title. Why I said this is important was the conference was about exploring synergies between the 1972 World Heritage Convention and the 2000 Convention on the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage or Living Heritage. So just to give you a snapshot, we had 41 speakers across 7 thematic sessions over 3 days. And we had participants from 236 participants from 67 countries who explored synergies, or I would say complementarity, between the 1972 and 2003 convention. And they identified active participation of community. So this is very important. Why I wanted to inform here is the conference identified the active participation of communities as key to enhance and new forms of safeguarding, be it culture, nature, or mixed sites. And the 7 diverse session, just to give you a rundown, we have from nature culture to nature culture. Without the slash, we are bringing the nature culture together. And of course, protecting heritage, integrating diversity, promoting community development through heritage conservation, cultural heritage in times of conflict, paradigm between tourism, heritage in urban context. And we have the gathering. The conference culminated into a call for action, which is known as the Spirit of Naples. And this is very clear that the highlight was community. Without community, either you're doing tangible, intangible, you cannot leave the community behind. And community meaning not just indigenous people, but community living in and around World Heritage Sites or even UNESCO designated sites. So with this, I think I also encourage, we can share my PowerPoint, the call for action. We would like our dear participants, WII, to bring this call of action. It's not binding, but it has all the important items that which we are looking into as Heritage Safeguard moves forward in our responsibility. So summary for the next 50. Of course, the strengthen, this captures from my PPT, but not just my PPT, but also a various 50th celebration we have been doing around the world by member states around the world. So it's strengthened the legal framework, the regulations, resources, capacity. I've highlighted the key things, climate action, which is very, very important, and local communities, item 6 again, and strengthen cooperation with development of partnerships. So these are some of the summary from the past for our next 50 years moving forward. And conclusion, like next 50 years of preserving the celebration of the global heritage, the UNESCO conference on policy, also to remind you of the Mondiacals that we had September 2022, overall, where we had a gathering of ministers around the world, and also 2,600 participants in Mondiacals, 135 ministers of culture, 83 NGOs, 32 intergovernmental organizations, and 9 UN agencies in Mondiacals. So this is the umbrella chapeau we are working under. And then we have the 50th celebration of the World Heritage, 50 years moving forward. And then for Asia Pacific, I would bring it our regional action plan for Asia and the Pacific, which we would launch 2023 after the Riyadh Committee and moving on until 2023. So having said that, I wish the webinar a big success, and thank you once again for inviting the World Heritage Center at UNESCO headquarters.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurung, for that wonderful presentation. And we are a little bit behind on schedule, and I know that we have some questions in the chat as well. But one quick question, ma'am, in the interest of time, if you can just address this, since you have worked in different geographies outside Asia Pacific as well, any common points or any particular scenarios which you feel are more applicable to Asia Pacific as opposed to other geographies? And if you find that there is something common which runs across geographies, that would be a good thing to know as well. Just quickly, if you could quickly address that now.
Okay, but Mr. Anuranjan, I can stay for a while. It's not that I'm running right away, okay? I would like to follow because this is important, but maybe I will be in and out if there's a meeting, but I will still follow, and my colleague Ian is here, and I know some of my colleagues from the center would also be here. If there's anything urgent burning issue, they will flag me. I'm in the office, so don't worry, I can be here. Okay, common issues for the Asia Pacific in particular, what I see as it's a very diverse region. I'm talking about World Heritage, not just the number of sites, but also in terms of capacity and in terms of how developed we are in managing, protecting our own World Heritage sites. 25 years ago, I started as a UN volunteer. So, and my first job was the safeguarding of Kathmandu Valley in World Heritage. And after 24 years, the danger listing cycle comes back. So, when I mentioned the first, I highlighted what were the first batch of World Heritage sites in Asia Pacific, and there were 2 from Nepal. But ever since the first decade, it hasn't moved. The number of sites got stuck. So there are challenges, and it's very diverse. But we have countries who are way much developed, where countries were stagnant, and we also have countries who don't have sites. And we also have countries who are submerging, who are going to submerge Tuvalu after a couple of decades, or even within the decade, it will be submerged. So the United Nations is helping Tuvalu in this Rising Nation Initiative program, where in 10 years, if we don't do Tuvalu ratified this year, May, but after a couple of years, they're going to go on submerged, climate change, right? So it's a diverse region. We have challenges. So I would, my take on this, your question, this is a very valid answer. What is a common thread is there's lots that we need to come together as Asia Pacific. We cannot work in silos. And when I say silos, are two things. I bring the World Heritage Convention and the 2003 convention, the Living Heritage Convention. This is why I took this opportunity to put in the Naples conference, meaning the communities. You have to engage the communities, right? Our speaker, the opening, mentioned clearly that we have so many communities, indigenous, she mentioned the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. But there are other communities, be it indigenous, be it local communities. We have villages, thousands of villages all over Asia Pacific. So without the communities, I think that's very important. That's one binding for all of us. But at the same time, we do have member states with capacities. We're developing. We already have many Japan Funds in Trust, ROK Funds in Trust projects that they are helping. China is helping a lot. India is being helping. We have all the C2Cs. We have all the means, but at the same time, we also need to build capacities in the region. So I would not have a straight answer. It's a complex thing. And there's a good point that you raised. So we have to work together, help, not just in silos, but we need to tap on the resources, meaning not just financial resources, but also human resources. And we have excellent field offices all over Asia and the Pacific. We are there, UNESCO field offices, UNESCO World Heritage Center, the ABs, the expert, the C2Cs, like WII. I think we can do a lot. There needs to be done, a lot needs to be done, but we can do so much. Right?
Thank you so much, Ms. Gurung, and thank you for your time. I understand your busy schedule, and we hope to engage with you later in this webinar as well. Thank you so much for your time.
And you can even send a chat box if colleagues or participants would like to send. You can also chat box. We will look into.
Yes, some questions have been put in the chat box. So thank you so much, Ms. Gurung.
Thank you.
With that, I would like to move to our second speaker for the day. And we have the pleasure of having Dr. R. Suresh Kumar, Nodal Officer, WIC2C. He's going to be speaking to us about the South Asia region. Dr. R. Suresh Kumar has extensive field and lab experience in taxonomy, ecology, genetics, and satellite telemetry. And Suresh sir, would you like to run your own presentation, or should I run it from my end, sir?
I'll do it. I'll share the screen.
All right, sir. Then I'm stopping my share. Thank you, sir.
Right. Is my screen visible to you?
It is, sir. So you need to go to full screen mode, though.
Is it? It is not in full screen mode.
Now it is, sir. Now it is, sir. It's good,
right.
Sir.
So
Yes,
does
sir.
it move?
Yes, it's moving. It's moving, sir.
Okay, great. So a very good morning and good afternoon to all the participants who have joined in the webinar today, and my heartfelt thanks to everyone. And yes, thank you, Anuranjan, for the brief introduction. And yes, so I'm here to talk about the WIC2C Center and our activities in the South Asian region. And yeah, so just a little bit more brief about me. I've been with the Wildlife Institute for the last 28 years, so I feel like a heritage right now. I love traveling. I'm more a naturalist at heart. So it has always been a discovery, when we visit different field sites. And I'm amazed with the amazing cultural diversity and natural diversity that we have. So when we talk about heritage here in India, it's very often one would think about the amazing monuments that we have, amazing temple structures that we have across the country, or for that matter, which is shared across in the other South Asian countries like Nepal and Bhutan and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, of course. So it's simply amazing. And this particular image in my cover slide is about the Kanchenjunga National Park, which is a World Heritage Site. It's in fact a mixed heritage site. It's right on it's a transboundary protected area, and it's right on the border with India and China. And at this point of time, all of these areas would be snowed down completely. And even here in Dehradun, we can feel the Himalayan chill. So Dehradun is about 250 kilometers north of Delhi, so right at the base of the Himalayas. And here I'm making this presentation from the Wildlife Institute. So the Wildlife Institute, with which I have been part of for the last 28 years, is an institution, an autonomous institution of the Ministry of Environment. So our primary mandate is to build capacity through training. So every year we are majorly involved in training Indian Forest Service officers as well as the other forest officers or management trainees in the field of wildlife management. And we also undertake research on wildlife. So we also have master's program in wildlife science. And so we are majorly responsible for the government of India in imparting knowledge and training relating to wildlife management across the entire country. We have also been majorly involved in training officers in other, South Asian states like Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. And so WI has a major presence in the South Asian region when it comes to natural areas or natural protected areas that we talk about. And when it comes to other aspects, especially the cultural heritage, there are other institutions which I would like to flag off at this point of time, which is the Archaeological Survey of India. So they are the major nodal points to the UNESCO World Heritage Convention, and we report to the Archaeological Survey of India. So they primarily focus on the archaeological sites and monuments, while we focus on the natural heritage sites. So in that premises, the Category 2 Center was established at the Wildlife Institute. It's almost now about 8 years that it has been in existence. And over the years, we have developed our skills in taking forward the issues relating to world heritage, natural heritage in particular. And so we have been conducting several training programs. We have been conducting some amount of research, and of course, disseminating information on natural heritage properties that are there in the region. And the webinar that we are conducting today, partly one of the mandate is to build network, and like what Ms. Himalchuli had mentioned, it's very important for us to come together and work together. So I, as the nodal officer of the WIC2C, along with my team, we're really looking forward to building partnerships, building networks, and how best we can scale up our activities in the region. So the key mandates have been capacity building, quite a number of them, the outstanding universal value of many of the sites that have been identified. And then we help different states. So we are like a federal institution, and we help the state institutions with nomination dossiers that need to be developed for sites, and then provide advisory to them. And periodic reporting to the World Heritage sites for the World Heritage sites is something that's very, very important, and that we've been doing. And very often we do get questions from members of the Parliament, Indian government, on aspects relating to the heritage, and we respond back to that in that. And of course, yes, we also provide inputs for IUCN's World Heritage Outlook. This is another important activity that we do. And on the education and outreach front, we did start off a master's program in heritage conservation a few years ago, and we are planning to initiate one such very soon. In the meantime, we also have initiated certificate courses in heritage management, and the primarily target audience have been officers from the forest departments, from the tourism department, and also the other stakeholders like Geological Survey of India and a few other institutions. So one of the key programs that we are very much looking forward to conduct, and that's going to happen in February 24, is a heritage course. And this, we are doing it for the Ministry of External Affairs, the Government of India. We are trying to reach out to many parts of the world. And this program is actually supported by the Ministry of External Affairs. And WIIC2C will be hosting the first such course. And we are very much gearing up for that. And I would say that this particular webinar and the discussions that would follow is also something that we would definitely have that coming in that particular course. And a whole lot of awareness programs we've been carrying out over the years, not only within the region, but we've also tried to reach out to other places. And this is definitely the need of the hour. A lot of sites still deserve a lot more focus, support from local people and people from far and beyond in management of these sites. So when we talk about natural and mixed World Heritage sites in South Asia, so we have a good number of sites across the region, and we have 12 natural World Heritage sites and one which is a mixed heritage site, that is the Kanchenjunga landscape in the northern part of India, northeastern part of India. And there are many cultural sites. There are 52 cultural sites. And the one that is marked in a window here, that is the Western Ghats. It's a serial nomination site, a number of 39 sites across the Western Ghats that have been inscribed as a World Heritage Site. So amazing landscape, amazing diversity that we have. So if you talk about South Asia, we are talking about 8 countries. And yes, we still do not have natural heritage sites from countries like Pakistan and Maldives and Bhutan and Afghanistan. We are in touch with some of these countries to help them identify sites that are truly important. But yes, the other sites, India being the largest landmass in the South Asian region, boasts of a larger number of sites, but there are equally very unique sites in Sri Lanka and Nepal, and as well in the Bangladesh. So amazing diversity in terms of natural sites, and also the unique species that exist in these sites, and which are also of significant conservation focus, is being brought under the natural heritage management. So India, or the South Asia for that matter, is an amazing landscape, given the high diversity of the geographical landmass, which includes the high mountain ranges of the Himalayas, or the old mountain systems in the Aravallis or the Western Ghats. Incredible sites, that geographical features that we have. And many of the river systems, so important for the 1.4 billion people, specifically to India, they have also shaped the mountains, along with the river systems, have literally shaped the cultural, the diversity that you come across the landscape. And attached or closely linked to this is the innumerable affinities or association to nature, whether it's about wildlife or just about the landscapes per se. The Narmada Valley in the middle part of the central part of India is yet again a very, very important river. From a geological point of view, it is extremely unique, and the Narmada River and its associated valleys do host the largest, the fossil deposits of dinosaur fossils that we find here. So very, very unique, and we are in the process of identifying a few of these sites to be made as to be inscribed as natural heritage sites. So I can just go on to talk about more about the amazing association, the cultural associations that in this Indian landmass or the South Asian landmass has it witnessed over time. So innumerable examples of the Mauryan Empire, what they did with elephant protection, to the innumerable tribal people that live across the Indian landmass, who with their cultural ethos continue to practice conservation in their own way, which is why even with 1.5 billion people, you still have a good number of wildlife species that survive. So, and large number of natural spaces still preserved. So, yes, so there are several examples. I wouldn't be able to go into each one of them, but it's extremely important when we talk about natural heritage in this landscape, a very, very strong linkage with people. So all of the sites that have been inscribed today have a very, very strong linkage. And that's the whole theme of this webinar today. How the nature and culture, the linkages, how we can strengthen further, how we can show the benefits of these sites to the people, that people participation in this can be truly rewarding. So there is still a long way to go, but we do have fantastic examples of how some of these linkages have really worked for several sites. To the extent that we talk about coexistence. Coexistence is, if you talk about a huge number of people living in the backyard with tigers and elephants and all of that, it's something, a big challenge, but it is happening. In a positive note, it is happening across the country. So it is primarily because of these cultural linkages. And with time, these are changing. So that is a challenge. But then how best we can try and recharge people with this thing about their ancestry, about their past, about their culture. That's the whole issue of it. And so, yes, so there are lots of challenges when it comes to management, when it comes to working with communities who are totally dependent on some of these sites which are declared as natural heritage sites. So with time, things are changing. While all of these challenges are there, the climate change and severe weather events that at least few of these sites face is real. And how we are going to manage the heritage properties that have been inscribed from these places is a challenge, while there is lots of dialogues and discussions happening. But without me mentioning this aspect of it, this webinar would be incomplete. So yes, so it is definitely very, very important. And we at the Government of India, we are trying to, we have initiated quite a few programs to understand climate change impacts on nature, on the natural landscapes, how species are responding. And so while those programs are ongoing, we are also in the process of trying to understand some of the natural heritage sites and how they are facing in the issue of climate change. So we are also now working with other stakeholders, other institutions in India. For example, we have the Geological Survey of India, which is another major institution who are responsible for geological sites of outstanding universal value. It comes under their mandate. So for the last few months, we have now been slowly in touch with them, trying to identify some of those unique sites like the meteorite craters. There are again strong linkages. Not only those sites are unique from the geological aspect of it, but some of these sites are also very unique for natural sites. And there are again cultural linkages to these sites. So trying to work with these partner institutions and identify or scale up our presence, our activities for this. And one of the images here, this particular image, is a very unique geological formation which is found in the Western Ghats. A site similar to this is there in Madagascar, which would mean that these are sites that have been all connected, the Western Ghats connected with the mountain ranges in the Madagascar. A small fragment of it has remained with India. So all of these linkages that we see across land masses are very, very unique. And so, yes, we are working towards that. There are other conventions, international conventions like the Ramsar sites. Many sites in India which are declared as Ramsar sites are very, very unique in terms of natural heritage. The Kibul Lamjau National Park in the northeastern India is an amazing site. It is a floating. It's a wetland, and the area is famous for its floating grassland. Very, very unique, and it is in the process of being nominated. So we are working with the departments there. We're working with the Ramsar site. We are in the process of understanding this. So the way ahead, both natural and cultural sites have the potential of a lot more management emphasis on nature culture linkages. Many of these sites are protected areas. They've been protected for many, many years to come. And with the World Heritage Tag or Natural Heritage Tag now come in, there is a lot more importance from the local communities who resides beside these areas that needs to be worked out, needs to be brought out. So yes, there's fantastic opportunities here. And yes, I really look forward to this. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. That's our national heritage animal, the Asian elephant, very important for India. And so thank you. Thank you for listening to me, and look forward to taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suresh Kumar, for that wonderful presentation and stressing on what makes the South Asia sub-region special even within the Asia Pacific region. Sir, in the interest of time, and because there are a number of questions in the chat box, I would request that you can address the questions in the chat, and in the meantime, we can move to the next speaker. And of course, this goes out to all the participants as well, that if we are unable to address them in the chat, we do have your emails. So we will try to respond to them eventually on email so that you have a detailed and well-researched query which you deserve. So with that, I would like to invite our next speaker who will be speaking to us about the Southeast Asian region. And we are privileged to have Professor Eric Zerrudo, whom we were happy to host in the beginning of the year as well. And he is director of the Center for Conservation of Cultural Property and Environment for the Tropics at the University of Santo Tomas in Philippines. And he has worked in World Heritage Evaluation and as a field expert for World Heritage sites. So Professor Zerrudo, if you can hear me, would your team be running the presentation? Should I stop sharing, sir?
So my team will be sharing the presentation. Thank you, Anuranjan.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry. Tadi bicara kang. Saya macam lah. Ani nak pensan tadi
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Professor Eric Zerrudo. Allow me to share a video snippet of the rice terraces of the Philippines, a World Heritage Site.
The rice terraces here in Benno are ancient. They're 2,000 to 3,000 years old. People have been living here and farming here for that long, and it's a simple way of life here. And these people have been living in these mountains for thousands of years. They use the water when it rains here in the rainforest, and they channel it through all the terraces, and that's how they irrigate all the fields and everything. And it's just a wakescape paradise, but no one even knew it was here. The native people here, the Tiwari tribe, are kind of governed by the Mbaki priests. And when we got here, we had to get their permission just to ride on the rice terraces. So they invited us up to their spot, and they gave us the permission at the end of the ceremony that we could ride on their rice terraces.
The rice terraces of the Philippines is a sacred landscape of the Ifugaos. In the video, it is interpreted as an extreme sport terrain for tourism. How do we perceive living cultural landscapes? This inquiry grounds this presentation entitled Capturing the Picture, Perfect or Imperfect, Evolving World Heritage Cultural Landscapes of Southeast Asia. The UNESCO World Heritage formally defined cultural landscapes as cultural properties that represent the combined works of nature and man. They're illustrative of the evolution of human society and settlement over time, under the influence of the physical constraints or opportunities presented by their natural environment and of successive social, economic, and cultural forces, both external and internal. The early cases of cultural landscapes were actually the ones in New Zealand, where the natural features around Mount Tongariro, originally inscribed for natural values in 1990, these were reclassified and they were inscribed as cultural landscapes in 1993. The one in Australia, Uluru Katachuta, the one in the Western Desert, was originally inscribed in the World Heritage List in 1987, and eventually it was also reinscribed and extended in 1994. So in the World Heritage Operational Guidelines, we have three types of cultural landscapes: the designed landscape, organically evolved landscape, which covers the relic or fossil landscape, and the continuing landscape. And we also have the associative landscape. The criteria for cultural heritage sites cover criteria 1 to 6, and the essence of cultural landscapes, the nature-culture link, the evolving character. These are all explicitly stated in criterion 5. What is it? Criterion 5 is to be an outstanding example of traditional human settlement, land use or sea use, representative of culture or cultures, or the human interaction with the environment, especially when it has become vulnerable under the impact of irreversible change. Based on these World Heritage statistics, we can see that there are at the moment a total of 1,199 World Heritage sites. And in Asia Pacific, there are 290 World Heritage sites, while in Southeast Asia, we have 45 World Heritage sites. Southeast Asia is composed of Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. For cultural sites, we have 933 for the world, Asia Pacific 206, for the world 121 cultural landscapes, and for Asia Pacific 18 out of 206 are cultural landscapes, and in Southeast Asia there are 30 cultural sites, 5 of which are cultural landscapes. So Southeast Asia has only 5 cultural landscapes inscription, with 3 registered under criterion 5. So these are organically evolving landscapes. The statistic shows that 5 is 16% of Southeast Asia, 2.4 of the Asia Pacific, and only 0.5% of the whole cultural sites registry of the world. In a study by Baumann and Kefeller, the study revealed the intent to increase representation of the Global South in World Heritage through the new category of cultural landscape was actually a myth. In fact, if you look at the category, this perpetuates the European dominance, which comprises over 50% of the total cultural landscape registered in the World Heritage List. In Southeast Asia, the 5 landscapes are Indonesia, cultural landscape of Bali province, the Subak system, as a manifestation of the Trihata Kirana philosophy. These were inscribed under criteria 3, 5, and 6. The Singapore Botanic Gardens for criteria 2 and 4. Lao PDR, the Wat Phu associated ancient settlements within the Champasak cultural landscape for criteria 3, 4, and 6. Vietnam, the Trang An landscape complex under criteria 5, 7, and 8. And the Philippines, the rice terraces of the Cordilleras for criteria 3, 4, and 5. The rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras is an outstanding example of an evolved living cultural landscape, epitomized the absolute blending of physical, sociocultural, economic, religious, and a political environment. This is a living landscape of unparalleled beauty. Please note that this was the first organically evolving cultural landscape inscribed in the World Heritage List in 1995. The rice terraces was voluntarily placed by the Philippines in the World Heritage Endangered List in 2000, and this was reverted back to the World Heritage List in 2012. So issues and challenges on the rice terraces include infrastructure developments such as haphazard building construction, road developments, terraces degradation like the giant worms, invasive species, the outmigration of many ifugaos, and inadequate government support. These are images of challenges confronting the rice terraces. Giant worms, you have the abandonment of the terraces, and the catastrophic typhoons that destroy layers and pan-layers of terraces. The overall subak system of Indonesia exemplifies the Balinese philosophical principle of Trihata Kirana that draws together the realms of the spirit, human world, and nature. Water temple rituals promote a harmonious relationship between people and their environment through the active engagement of the people with ritual concepts that emphasize dependence on the life-sustaining forces of the natural world. The issues that confront the subak system actually cover rapid urbanization, especially land conversion, rapid population growth, tourism, climate change, and the depletion of soil and paddy ecology. There was a study conducted with regards to the impact of tourism, and according to Rami and Setiawan, they discussed this impact particularly in the areas and the values of the traditional Subak village of Jatilui. Trang An. Trang An of Vietnam is a spectacular landscape that illustrates human occupation of seasonal hunter-gatherers and how they adapted to the major climatic and environmental changes, especially the repeated inundation of the landscape by the sea after the last ice age. Issues that confront the Trang An landscape cover the need for public-private partnership, the need for heritage-based governance, and programs regarding environmental concern. Of particular challenge is the tourism impact and the crowd management that has been confronting many of the tourist destinations of Vietnam. One highlight was the impact of tourism to environment and nature. This showed the increased amount of wastewater, the increased emissions of transport vehicles, noise pollution, and the impact to the natural habitats of plants, animals, threatening biodiversity. From the study of Nguyen An Tan, she elaborated on the negative impacts of over-tourism on culture, society, and also the environment. Organically evolved cultural landscapes are confronted by overwhelming pressures of the 21st century: globalization, technological advancement, population mobility, tourism, spread of participatory democracies, smart economies, and definitely the dramatic climate change. In Buckley's critical review of the World Heritage Cultural Landscapes category, she highlighted 6 problematics. These problematics covered the legacy effect, the uneven application of the category, confusion with regards to the category, types, themes, and approaches, the complications of the nomination, nomenclature, and the nature of cultural landscape is that everything is changing. The World Heritage, particularly the continuous evolving landscape, is saddled by conceptual and practical challenges on heritage due to natural, political, socio-cultural dynamics. The new context has evolved new genres and nomenclature of heritage, such as shared heritage, contested heritage, phantasmal heritage, pendular heritage, dark heritage, heritage of the margins, heritage of the everyday, and there are many more diversified categories. In this dynamic pressure to heritage that created new genres require new conservation approaches and experimentations. So here, according to the listing of Lindblad, they show the conservation could be the antiquarian approach, value-based approach, heritage as a resource catalyst approach, human rights approach, critical heritage approach, and the living heritage approach. The organically evolving cultural landscape sites may find benefit in adopting new or hybrid conservation approaches, such as the living heritage approach and the landscape heritage approach. Conservation in the context of living heritage approach primarily aims at the maintenance and enhancement of continuity. This safeguards heritage within its connection Even there are certain occasions that the fabric might be harmed. Conservation also aims at embracing evolution, change over time, guaranteeing the relevance to contemporary society. Also, the landscape approach accommodates for larger, more complex, more intricate, with attention to setting, views, and the importance of relation between elements as well as individual sites. This approach focuses not only on the products, but the processes of culture. As the heritage discipline advances with new ways of thinking and understanding, new technologies, terminologies, and frameworks develop. So here, I'd like to introduce this concept of the cultivar. A cultivar is a plant variety that has been produced in cultivation by selecting breeding. People have purposely selected for desired traits. World Heritage Sites are superlative selections of sites that have outstanding universal value narratives and integrity. This cultivation of values are realized through various protection mechanisms required by the Convention. Whether as a precaution or proaction against uncertainty, heritage conservation is guaranteed through the Conservation Management Plan, Tourism Development Plan, and even the climate change mitigation plans. On the other hand, ruderal is a Latin word for rubble. These are opportunistic plant species that take root in disturbed or interrupted environment. This evolved out of the concept of unintended ecologies. This asserts that systems do not remain in a steady state, but experience continual phases of collapse and unraveling, followed by phases of release and reconfiguration. The transformation of UNESCO conventions, the dynamics of natural and social pressures, emergence of new types of heritage, develop new thoughts on heritage approaches to conservation. Cultural heritage is a continuing human interaction with the environment. In the World Heritage approach, cultural heritage is a cultivar heritage where conservation is premeditatedly programmed. In this case, the approach is precautionary and proactionary. In the living heritage approach, it is a ruderal heritage where conservation is organically evolutionary. Ruderal heritage allows for ruination and regeneration. As a conclusion, how do we picture organically evolving cultural landscape? First, cultural landscape, along with its nomenclature, is a World Heritage construct. Originally intended to boost Global South representation in the World Heritage, this is a myth in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asian evolving cultural landscape sites are highly vulnerable to natural ruptures like climate change and man-made development pressures such as tourism and infrastructure. And the last one is that the World Heritage cultural landscapes need to be reviewed and assessed to evolve new thoughts, new terminologies, and new paradigm, very, very contextualized in the contemporary realities of society. And with this, I would like to greet everybody, mabuhay, at maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Professor Zerrudo, for that wonderful presentation and bringing us visuals of lush and rich Southeast Asia. I think your presentation really shed light on what makes it special, particularly on the side of the cultural landscapes. Thank you for your presentation. And in continuation with what I said earlier, so questions are there in the chat. So if you wish to address them on chat, you might, and in the we will of course reach out to you if any of the participants have questions specific to Southeast Asia. With that, I would like to invite to the webinar our next speaker, who is actually on the farthest side as far as the time zone is concerned. Steve, thank you so much for joining this webinar at this late hour. And Dr. Steve Brown is Senior Research Fellow at the University of Canberra. He has qualifications in Heritage Studies and works in the fields of cultural landscapes, World Heritage, nature culture integration. He has been part of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. So he's a true all-rounder because he's from the ICOMOS side. He was the Scientific Symposium coordinator and for ICOMOS in the recent Sydney Symposium. And he's also part of the IUCN Commission on World Protected Areas. Steve, would you like to share your presentation or should I be sharing it for you?
I'm happy for you to share, Anuranjan. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Give me a second. I'll just get your presentation going.
Yes. So while that's happening, I will just say thank you to the Wildlife Institute of India for the invitation to present here, and thank you to Anuranjan for organising my organising stuff. Thank you.
And see, we'll just launch your.
I'll keep going. Okay.
Can you see? Can you see? Okay, I think I need to
Yes.
go to full screen, right?
Yep.
Whoops. Hold on. There seems to be a little bit of confusion. I'll take a second here, Steve. Sorry.
Yep.
The
I'll
tech
keep
revenue-
going then while that happens. So I acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the country or territory of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri, the traditional custodians of the land on which Australia's capital city, Canberra, is located. I extend the acknowledgement and respect to all First Nations and Indigenous people attending this webinar. It's important to make the point that Indigenous peoples have occupied Australia for over 60,000 years. This means that any part of the present-day Australian continent has tens of thousands of years of First Nations history. Thus, any Australian property inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List will have a deep time history and will lie within the country of one or more First Nations communities. Next slide, thanks. Next slide. Thus, all World Heritage properties in Australia will have significant First Nations values and attributes regardless of the justifications of their listing. In this presentation, I will focus on social justice, injustice, and Indigenous people's rights. I argue that advancing these aspects of Australian World Heritage properties will achieve improved holistic management of nature cultures when traditional knowledge is married with scientific and humanist approaches. Next slide. By way of background, I have research interest and practical experience in cultural landscapes, improved integration of natural and cultural heritage, what I term nature cultures, and the management of protected areas, which are all fields relevant to the World Heritage System. In the field of World Heritage, I have more than 15 years of experience in Australia and internationally. For me, this journey began in 2008 when I undertook a technical evaluation mission at Bikini Atoll nuclear test site, which was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2010. A significant part of that story is the displacement and treatment of Indigenous Bikinians in the context of nuclear colonialism. Next slide. This slide illustrates the context of World Heritage within Australia's broader heritage system. So the Australian heritage system is hierarchical and is ranked from World Heritage as highest to local heritage as lowest. The Australian heritage system adopts different approaches across natural, Indigenous, and historic heritage domains. It is siloed across legislation, regulation, administration, and practice. Nevertheless, a thresholds-based value system is commonly used in the assessment of heritage places. And protected areas in Australia are designated using a comprehensive, adequate, and representative system across Australia's 89 bioregions and 419 sub-regions. Next slide, thanks. So Australia currently has 20 World Heritage properties. 12 are categorised as natural sites, 4 as cultural sites, and 4 as mixed sites. The 2 properties shown in brown on the slide are recognised as cultural landscapes. The Budgebim Cultural Landscape and Murujuga Cultural Landscape are Australia's first Indigenous-led World Heritage nominations. Australia has 5 items on its tentative list, 2 are boundary extensions and 3 are new proposals. Next slide, thanks. I won't talk specifically about the sites, but I would refer you to this great book which describes and illustrates each of Australia's 20 World Heritage properties. Next slide. The World Heritage System is widely recognised as having deeply colonial foundations. This is evident in 2 ways. In 1972, the convention drew on Western heritage approaches that treated nature and culture, natural and cultural heritage, as separate domains. And I would note that this remains an ongoing issue, for example, in relation to the idea of natural beauty in Criterion 7. Linked to this disconnection was the use of World Heritage by state parties to perpetuate Indigenous exclusion and disadvantage. Again, I'm specifically talking about Australia, but that may apply to other places. So in Australia, these issues are demonstrated by a number of examples. First, the first Tasmanian Wilderness nomination dossier in 1982 explicitly stated that Tasmanian Aboriginal peoples are extinct. As shown on the poster at the bottom right, this was despite the fact that in 1976, 6 years before the World Heritage inscription, the remains of Truganini were returned to Tasmanian Aboriginal people. So there was a recognition by the government that Australian Aboriginal people, Tasmanian Aboriginal people, continued their culture. Second, the nomination of Ayers Rock Mount Olga National Park in 1987 for its geological significance and natural beauty, but not its Indigenous values. The original nomination of what is now known as Uluru-Katajuka National Park while making reference to the Nangu traditional owners, did not include the tens of thousands of years of Indigenous ownership to be of outstanding universal value. And thirdly, the Greater Blue Mountains area nomination that included recognition of its First Nations values and attributes, but which ICOMOS and the World Heritage Committee did not accept as meeting OUV, Outstanding Universal Value. The nomination dossier argued the Greater Blue Mountains demonstrated criteria 6 on the basis of the intense interrelationship of nature and people over tens of thousands of years. The ICOMOS evaluation did not accept this to be the case because the evaluation argued European invasion destroyed the perfect symbiotic relationship that Aboriginal people had with the natural environment. This is a deeply problematic and offensive position for the current traditional owner groups and an argument that served to reinforce a racist reading of Australia's colonial history. Next slide. The disconnection between nature and culture in the World Heritage System is widely accepted and extensively written about. Prior to 2000, all of Australia's World Heritage listed places were either inscribed as natural or mixed properties. The adoption in 1992 by the World Heritage Committee of the concept of cultural landscape was intended to go some way toward recognising the interplay of humans and the natural environment, and we've heard some critiques from some of the speakers. In 1994, the renamed Uluru-Katajuka National Park listing was reinscribed as an associate of cultural landscape, the second such inscription on the World Heritage List after Tongariro National Park in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Just on the side, I point out that the images of Uluru and the Greater Blue Mountains as shown on this slide do not include people. Such visual presentations are typical of many of the galleries on the World Heritage website. Such dominant imagery serves to reinforce the construct of nature as peopleless and emphasise the materiality of World Heritage places. Nevertheless, change is happening in the World Heritage System to better integrate nature and culture. Next slide, please. I mention this project because it is an example of change that is being undertaken at the global level and I believe is making gradual impact on better integrating natural and cultural heritage, values, governance and management in World Heritage practice. The Connecting Practice project, launched in 2013, is a collaborative project between ICOMOS and IUCN and with the financial support of the Christensen Fund. The project aims to define new methods and strategies to better integrate natural and cultural heritage within the World Heritage System and conservation practice in general. Next slide, thanks. Of Australia's 20 World Heritage properties, as I've said, 2 are recognised as cultural landscapes. Uluru Katajuka National Park and Budgebim Cultural Landscape. Murujuga Cultural Landscape has been nominated to the World Heritage List and is currently under evaluation. Budgebim and Murujuga are significant in Australia for being World Heritage nominations led by First Nations communities. In both instances, the cultural landscape concept is co-opted as the best fit between Indigenous worldviews that do not separate nation and culture and the World Heritage system in which the separation is entrenched. The cultural landscape category has served to support the recognition of Indigenous knowledge through the use of Criterion 3 on cultural traditions and land management through the use of Criterion 5 with outstanding interactions. Next slide. As an aside, congratulations to the Gunditjmara community, the traditional owners of the Budgebim cultural landscape, for being awarded the 2023 UNESCO Greece Melina Mercouri International Prize for Safeguarding and Management of Cultural Landscapes. And you can see in the centre holding the prize, Uncle Dennis Rose, an elder of the Gunditjmara. Budgebim cultural landscape was recognised as World Heritage because it is an outstanding example of human interaction with the environment spanning over 6,000 years. The prize recognises the Gunditjmara community's effective management of the landscape, demonstrating that cultural and spiritual linkages with the natural environment can offer solutions to tackling contemporary challenges such as unplanned infrastructure development, depopulation, changes in traditional lifestyles, and climate change. Next slide, thanks. In September 2023, a one-day Murujuga symposium was held in Sydney that brought together First Nations people from across Australia and the world to hear about the World Heritage nomination of the Murujuga cultural landscape and to talk about the challenges and opportunities that Indigenous people face in managing World Heritage properties. The symposium was launched by the Honourable Tanya Plebiscite, Minister for the Environment. The Minister told delegates that the Australian government had committed $5.5 million for a grants program to add First Nations heritage values to existing national and World Heritage listed areas. And as you can see on the slide, the program aims to identify new Indigenous heritage values at existing World Heritage and national listed places, prepare permissions for such, increase protection for such, and improve management of World Heritage and National Heritage listed places with Indigenous heritage. A big question in my mind remains how much of this funding will actually go to First Nations groups as opposed to non-Indigenous commercial investigative companies. Next slide. So in this short presentation, I've argued that World Heritage is a neo-colonial project as evidenced by the separation of nature and culture in World Heritage practices, but this is changing. For the first 2 decades of the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, Australia nominated so-called natural sites that failed to recognise the role of First Nations peoples in creating the natural environment through land and sea management, including cultural burning practices. In the more extreme claims, the nominations recognise First Nations peoples as extinct and cultureless and failed to acknowledge the roles of Indigenous peoples in making the natural environment. The divide, on page. Recent Australian World Heritage nominations, Budgebim and Murujuga, have been Indigenous-led and inclusive of traditional knowledge and practices. Thus, I conclude that a greater focus on social justice, injustice, and Indigenous people's rights can achieve improved holistic management of nature cultures when traditional knowledge is married with scientific and humanist approaches. And I would like to think that the Asia-Pacific region can take the lead in this work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that powerful presentation, bringing up some problematic aspects of the World Heritage legacy. And I agree with you that I think images play an important part in conveying natural sites as people-less, but particularly in South Asia, we are well aware that there is no purely untouched landscape, in the sense that there's always some human activity. And I think that's an important point to bring up. And that all in all will serve us well in terms of connecting nature and culture. With
I do
that,
think it's
I
do think it's slightly ironic. I said that when the previous speaker, Dr. Zerrudo, showed those images of Vietnam and the excessive tourism that's having such huge impacts on those places. So there's a kind of balance, I think, to be achieved there. Thank you.
Right. I think Ms. Himalchuli has a quick comment to make. Ma'am, would you like to see a hand raised?
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Steve, Dr. Brown. Excellent presentation. And I was trying, I'm sorry for taking this moment, but because you also added, you had a question in the chat box regarding the World Heritage and Living Heritage. So I just want to clarify very quick. The reason I'm saying definitely World Heritage sites are with people, as you have clearly mentioned. Living heritage are intangible cultural heritage. The note that I made earlier was because at UNESCO, we do have the 2003 convention for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage, which we also term as living heritage. So I'm just trying to point out there are two separate conventions. One is for World Heritage 1972, one is for 2003, which has been going on 50 and 20 years, right? 2003 just celebrated their 20th anniversary, whereas the 1972 convention celebrated its 50th anniversary. We're going now on the 51st. So these are two separate key culture conventions, but now it's the reason I showed you the Naples conference is how do we synergize this? Because,
Absolutely.
as you clearly pointed, criteria 6 under this 1972 World Heritage Convention talks about living heritage, but not so much. But whereas living heritage is part and parcel of any tangible sites around the world.
Yep.
So that's just for clarity. Definitely, your presentation speaks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And I completely agree with you. Thank you for those comments. That I think in some ways the two conventions acted to confuse the way in which we can think about the world and the heritage and inheritance by seeing somehow intangible heritage be sectioned off from both material culture and world heritage values. And so I sincerely welcome the Naples work and trying to look at the synergies between those conventions, because I think it was a really important task to achieve. So I express my thanks to you for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gurung, and thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for this amazing discussion post your presentation. And I think it's a great segue into the next segment of our webinar, I think, which will be a little more of a give and take as far as discussion is concerned. We are now entering the panel discussion phase of it, and we have an extensive selection of panelists with a wide variety of experience. Moderator for the session will be Dr. Nehru Prabakaran, who is a scientist at WIIN, also Associate Nodal Officer for WII C2C, Wildlife Institute of Category 2 Center. And he has worked in a number of ecological and anthropological factors, and also ecosystem restoration. He will be the moderator for the session. And we also have with us Dr. Nayeon Lee, who will be joining us from Korea, from the International Center for Interpretation and Presentation of World Heritage Sites. Her main interest is how to represent the multiple use values of heritage. She will be one of our panelists. We are also honored to have Ms. Dr. Benno Boer, Program Specialist and Chief of Sector Natural Sciences at the UNESCO New Delhi Cluster Office. He has worked for long service periods in Europe, the Arab region, Africa, and Asia. And he has worked on a number of ecological issues, including climate change, blue carbon ecosystems, science education, and climate resilience for human living. Also on the panel, we have Mr. Madan Singh Chauhan, who is Director, ASI, Archaeological Survey of India. And we also have Dr. Aditya Ghosh, who is Fellow UNDRR and ADN, and he's currently based in Leicester University, UK. He is a human geographer with an experience in intangible heritage, and he has worked with a number of interesting organizations. As you can see, Wildlife Institute of India, and World Wildlife Federation, and Encyclopedia Britannica, and the Times of India. With that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Nehru Prabakaran, who will be moderating the session. So,
thank you, Anuranjan, for giving this opportunity, and it's a wonderful pleasure to lead this particular panel discussion. Just to give a brief introduction about this particular panel discussion. So it's like the previous presenters, whether it is Professor Zerrudo or Dr. Steve Brown has mentioned, we are in the Southeast, in the Asia Pacific region. The nature and culture are highly interlinked, and this is a landscape. We also have so much of human population. So in the midst of the increasing population and the increasing aspirations of developments, how are we going to preserve the nature culture linkages, and how we can take forward the heritage so that the natural and cultural landscapes remain as it is, or remain with a little change, not too much of change. It can not going beyond its threshold levels. So it is amazing to have 4 panelists who are again from a very diverse background, starting from policy research and management aspect, and especially the nodal agency from India, which looks after all the heritage convention related issues, Madan Singh, Chauhan, and also we have with us people specialized on interpretation and folklore, and it's a great thing. And so what I'm going to do over this next 30 minutes is I will pose a few questions based on the expertise of the panelists, and then I'll receive their comments. And at the end of the questions, so I like to kind of, within the panelists, they can kind of interact what kind of questions they can pose each other. And then we can take questions from the audience. I also request the previous speaker to stay back, and if you have any questions, you can also participate in the panel discussion at the end of the session when we have the question and answer session. So this is about it. And without wasting much time, I will first go with the first speaker, first panelist for today, Ms. Neoli, Senior Program Specialist from the Republic of Korea. So like we were discussing over the last few sessions, so the things are changing. There are a lot of dangers are going on. There are climate change or the human population, the development, whatever it may be. So how we can kind of, in terms of the Asia Pacific societies, and what is your opinion? Asia Pacific societies have always known the intrinsic connections between nature and culture. What particular interpretation technique and strategies at heritage places help better convey those values? Because this is very pertinent as we are kind of declining the interest towards the nature culture interlinkages. How we can get the message across to wider audiences? So Dr. Neoli, please.
Good afternoon. So actually for the 5 minutes discussion, I prepared my presentation file. So can I share it? Yes, thank you very much. Can you see that? Okay. So, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nayeon Lee, working at International Center for Interpretation and Presentation of World Heritage Sites as a senior program specialist. And I would like to thank WII for inviting me here today. And I'm very excited to discuss a topic that I have been thinking and studying. And although I'm here today as a representative of WHIPIC, I would like to share what I have been researching and thinking about as an individual researcher of heritage interpretation. So I've got 2 questions for today's discussion. So first, are there particular interpretive techniques that effectively convey the value of heritage in Asia Pacific region? Second, what principles and guidelines should be followed to interpret heritage with multiple layers of heritage, history, and memory in both cultural and natural heritage. So I'm going to talk about these briefly in the next 5 minutes. So before answering these two questions, I want to introduce the concept of heritage interpretation and presentation first. Last year and this year, WHIPIC has been working on definition of interpretation and presentation, but there is no formalized definition yet. So today I would like to introduce my own definition, which was made after years of research. So heritage interpretation is the activity of recognizing the multiple values of heritage and selecting representative values based on specific intentions. And heritage presentation is any activity that formulated the representative values of heritage as a result of interpretation. So when we interpret and present heritage, it should be inclusive. So inclusive heritage interpretation refers to the attitude that respects all the different values contained in heritage, understands the value of people and communities who live in it, and reflects the values of present rather than just preserving what it was in the past. So as we have heard in previous lectures, the Asia-Pacific region has a stronger integrative perspective of nature and culture aspects than other regions. So just as anthropology defines culture as a result of the ways of life that humans have found to adapt to and survive in nature, it also encompasses a natural component known as the environment, and it is therefore desirable to look at culture and nature holistically. Of course, the current World Heritage System reflects a dichotomy between natural and cultural heritage, which comes from mostly Western culture. While some people may view this as a UNESCO strategy for efficient heritage management, there is a need to interpret the cultural natural values of heritage in the holistic manner. So what kind of interpretation strategy is needed? The answer is people and their intangible heritage. The most important emphasis in heritage interpretation is on the present and people. In particular, the value of people, which has been neglected in heritage practice, should be reflected in new ways of heritage interpretation. In other words, beyond the hardware value of the heritage, the stories of people living there should be reflected in the value of heritage. By realizing this, wisdom, memory, and traditions of people living with nature, called intangible heritage, will bridge the gap between culture and nature. It's worth emphasizing that it's easy to it's easy to incorporate natural elements in cultural heritage because the anthropological definition of culture already includes elements of the natural environment. However, there is still a lot of work to be done by researchers to discover and integrate cultural elements in the natural heritage, I'm sorry. So when we find the people and their intangible heritage, intangible values into heritage interpretation process, we are confronted with multiple layered memories and histories that have accumulated over time. So what principles and guidelines are needed for the heritage interpretation that honors them all? First, we need the communication principle. The most important part of the process is to identify what values are embedded in the heritage, and this will require an active dialogue with heritage stakeholders to uncover their values. The second is the principle of compromise. Once we have recognized the diversity of values in heritage through the communications principle, we will need to compromise between contradiction, conflict-generating values in the heritage interpretation process. Recognizing all the diversity of values can have the side effect of people asserting their own values without trying to understanding the values of other groups and their values. This is why the heritage interpretation process must reconcile the values and understand them as one holistic value. Finally, there is a principle of capacity building, which should be done in advance of the heritage process. So when I have taught heritage interpretation to various groups like heritage interpreters at sites, intangible heritage practitioners, and other like students, I have found that most people do not know what heritage interpretation is, what kind of heritage interpretation is correct, and what their role is in the heritage interpretation process. Therefore, capacity building program must be provided on ongoing basis to ensure that all stakeholders of heritage are actively involved in the heritage interpretation process. So this is very short presentation. So I've only scratched the surface of the discussion, but I will be happy to add more when we have free talking and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nayeon. Thank you for once again emphasizing on the value of people to be recognized in the heritage and the interpretation angles. So, our next panelist on the for today, I invite Dr. Benno. Dr. Benno, from your expertise, I realized that you have a wide experience of working with different countries. So one question I really like to ask you is, as a program specialist for natural sciences in the UNESCO cluster office for 6 South Asian countries, what are your observations on the interplay between high human population and natural system? Because like we are seeing, this Asian region seeing a boom in the population's been increasing. How are we going to respond to that? How the heritage system is going to respond to this?
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Dr. Nehru, for the question. So on population, I'm serving 6 very different countries here in the New Delhi cluster. These are vastly diverse countries in terms of geomorphology and socioecology. They also have very different constraints when it comes to the interplay between human populations and natural systems. India, for the start with, which is the giant, the superpower in this region, has already overtaken China. It has exceeded 1.4 billion people. And according to UNDISA, until the end of the century, India will add another 265 million people to the 1.4 billion. So India is a superpower with issues, because these 265 additional million people, they need to consume natural resources, they need education, they need shelter, they need food, they need water, they need energy. So, and India is one of only 3 countries globally that has a geomorphological range that ranges all the way from coral reefs at the coastal areas to above 8,000 meters high mountain peaks. The other country in this realm here in South Asia is Bangladesh, which is the country that receives more tropical cyclones than any other country. It has a population of 173 million people. expected to grow to 193 million by 2055. The Sundarbans, the largest mangrove ecosystem forest in the world, is of concern because they will get more saline water from the seafront due to sea level rise. In the same time, due to the melting of glaciers and the bursting of glacial lakes in the Himalaya mountain chain, it will initially also receive more fresh water from the Ganga and the Brahmaputra river until the tipping point of the glaciers. Then it will receive less waters. Sri Lanka then is not a small island developing state, but it is a relatively small country and an island state. It's just coming out of an economic crisis. The good news in Sri Lanka is the population is stable. It has already peaked. In Sri Lanka, of course, with the issues that the country has, we should focus on water, energy, and food security. Perhaps establishing a United Nations Green Academy in Colombo that can then function as a demonstration hub for the involvement of young people and communities, so that it can be replicated throughout the country to enhance community resilience for climate change issues. Nepal is, they have about 31 million, it's growing, expected to peak at 35 million by 2050. Nepal has frequent natural disasters, and many of these are linked to human development. So we cannot just say it's a natural disaster. Many of these natural disasters are, of course, accelerated by human activities. Nepal and Bangladesh are both two of the countries here that do not yet have UNESCO biosphere reserves, because UNESCO does not only have the World Heritage sites, UNESCO has also the biosphere reserves, which are 1 year older than the World Heritage sites. They're from 1971. And UNESCO is also host to the Global Geoparks Network. So these three site systems could be of relevance. The fourth country is the Maldives, the lowest lying country globally above high tide mark. Maldives has currently about 520,000 people, is expected to grow by 586,000 people by 2040. It has 1,192 islands, and they are disappearing over time. The country depends on marine resources and tourism, so it needs a tourism master plan that considers the ecological carrying capacity. Does the country with such a small population of only 520,000 people, do they really have the capacity for environmental management, or do they depend on others to assist them? So enhancing the knowledge and skills of the population and community is essential for sound science-based environmental management. We have to be careful with the numbers and types of tourism in the Maldives, trying to avoid adverse impacts on the natural and cultural systems. Bhutan is also a country that is very small by population. It has 790,000 people right now. The population is expected to peak by 2055 at a number of 906,000 people. I just read in the paper this morning that Bhutan is planning to develop a new massive international green city in an area over 1,000 square kilometers on its border with Assam, which is one of the Indian states in the northeast of India. Bhutan is currently planning a biosphere reserve. We are assisting them. For the time being, it has no biosphere reserve yet. I visited Bhutan in May this year. It is perhaps one of the cleanest, maybe the cleanest country in the world. It can function as a demonstration hub for all of South Asia and maybe also many other countries in the world, also in terms for science-based environmental management. But what about Bhutan's indigenous capacity to handle natural and cultural heritage? I believe enhancing the environmental management capacity of young people, including young girls and women, is absolutely essential for good natural heritage conservation and development. So my take-home message for that question, Dr. Nehru, is science-based environmental education, curricular and extracurricular education is essential, and we should establish more biosphere reserves, more world natural heritage sites and geoparks as an essential tool. These are the best tools that we have for the question that you asked me, what to do about the population pressure.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Boer. Like you are already mentioned about there is not only the human population growth pressure, but also you have the pressure from climate change and various environment and issues related with the policies, environmental policies of each nations also contribute to this mounting pressure on the heritage or natural heritage of each of these countries. So I would like to ask you a quick comments on a following question. So drawing on your experience in different geographies of the world, what suggestions and examples comes to mind with regard to restoration of connection between culture and nature? Because when the way ahead is have to have a very integrated management of culture and nature would be the one you suggested, biosphere reserves, more biosphere reserves in these countries would be a way forward. So what is your suggestions comes to mind? You already, of course, mentioned about the establishment of more biosphere reserves. In addition to that, is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Nehru. So, first of all, I think since we've all been very isolated during the COVID-19 crisis, when we've been sitting at home alone, I think that was the latest wake-up call to realize that we are sitting globally in one boat. We should really have realized that 50 years earlier, when in 1971, when the world was hit by the first oil crisis. But at the time, we didn't have politicians in the world, really nobody with a background in ecology, biology, environmental management, climatology, meteorology, and so on. So it was very much ignored. They were just thinking about how can we get fossil fuels back cheaper. So we are sitting globally in one boat, and we know that since some time. We know that since more than 50 years. Many of the global ecosystems have already been lost, fragmented, and tilted because of the overexploitation of natural resources. Bhutan is a good example that political will and the involvement of communities can achieve good results. It has a lot of forest protected and is perhaps one of the cleanest countries in the world. Other countries can learn from Bhutan. The second point I want to make is that we all of us, 8 billion people. When I was born, we've been 3 billion people. Now we have exceeded 8. We should all become environmental stewards. It is high time to understand climate change well, which is currently not the case. Currently, we still have black painting and greenwashing going on. We need to talk about climate change based on science, and this is why UNESCO, together with 10 other UN agencies, we have developed climate science literacy materials in many languages. I should be very happy to share that with all of you, and I also invite the participants perhaps to volunteer to translate it into the languages that they speak. It will help via schools and universities to enhance our knowledge and skills on climate resilience. Climate change has always existed. It exists right now. It's being accelerated by us, by deforestation and greenhouse gas releases. And we really must not think that it will go away somehow by itself, and it will impact natural and cultural heritage significantly. The third point is the best nature and culture conservation and community involvement system that we have is the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. It's also the World Heritage Convention, and it's also the global network of geoparks. We also have the Ramsar Convention. We also have from the FAO the global intangible agricultural heritage. So these are the 5 sites that we have in the UN system. They are very important. We have currently 748 biosphere reserves in more than 134 countries. These biosphere reserves are very important. because they put people at the heart. And they have a different management plan when, for example, compared with World Heritage Sites, which are globally unique or of outstanding importance for humanity. But they can complement each other, and that is very important. So these sites are places to apply, test, and advocate for best environmental practices based on science and in harmony with nature and the people's local cultural heritages, intangible and tangible. In my opinion, we need to increase the number of biosphere reserves to around 1,000 until 2050 and connect them through wildlife migration corridors. As an example, the Sundarbans, for example, they are a World Heritage Site and a biosphere reserve on the Indian side. On the larger side, which is in Bangladesh, they are a World Heritage Site. So we will catalyze a dialogue between Bangladesh and India to try to persuade Bangladesh to also manage them as a biosphere reserve, because that will put people at the center of the attention. So not just to conserve wildlife, for example, for emotional reasons, but also to put the people there at the center. Thank you, Dr. Nehru, and thank you everybody for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Boer. Thank you for emphasizing once again the increased protected areas and keeping the people in the center of the conservations through the biosphere reserve concept. And so I'll move to the next panelist today, Dr. Aditya Ghosh. So Dr. Aditya, so like all the speakers were discussing about a lot of population growth, modernization, and in development in the Asia Pacific region. So with the modernization, many of the societies, the indigenous societies, also losing their local ecological knowledge. Along with it, also we are losing a lot of folklore of associated with the natural heritage of them. So, so my first question to you is, what role can intangible heritage, particularly Asia Pacific folklore traditions, play in restoring connections between nature and heritage? Dr. Aditya Ghosh?
Right, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for these questions. I might sound a little radical at times, but you'll have to bear with me with that. So essentially what we understand about, and my work has been for the past 15 years, concentrated in Indian and Bangladesh Sundarbans. So I was very happy that it was mentioned every now and then, as well as in the Western Ghats. So these are two heritage sites that I've worked in, and my understanding from that are critically important role of knowledge, which you've mentioned, Dr. Nehru, that we are losing at a rapid pace. At the same time, we are investing a lot on research to develop new knowledge. But at the same time, the existing knowledge that we already had and that was developed over thousands of years on sustainable human, non-human relationships have been lost and is being lost every day. Now, it's very easy to say that it's lost. So, but then if we are trying to look at how is this getting lost and how it's kind of a regular attrition of knowledge that is taking place, and how kind of a different kind of knowledge system is trying to dominate that, I'd point out the very important role that, of course, India has played in terms of instituting joint forest management, instruments such as joint forest management, participatory forestry. However, I also was very pleased to hear a lot of talk about negative impacts of, for example, tourism. And many of these impacts are directly on local knowledge systems, local economic, local ecological behavior, local ecological sustainable behavior that people have always had, kind of a respect for nature, kind of respect for non-human, which of course in tourism sector, it gets completely commercialized. So tourists don't have a sense of space and the sense of place that the locals have. Locals have been born there, have been growing up there, and tourists are largely still outsiders in that sense. And their sort of they are looking for entertainment of certain kind, and that really intervenes with the value system. That really kind of creates a conflict with the local value systems, local meanings attached to various kinds of non-humans and humans that they have respected. Now, if we look at the system of local knowledge and see how they have been preserved over sort of thousands of years, we see that these, of course, there's no documented evidence as much, right? So we don't have documentation of knowledge, and particularly that of traditional knowledge. So these have been coded and codified in various kinds of rituals, various kinds of norms, various kinds of festivals, various kinds of practices. And in Sundarban, for example, there's this cult of Bon Bibi, or which is a goddess. Now, she is considered to be the custodian of the forest, and the custodian, such a custodian that everyone has to respect that custodian. Each one who lives in that space, irrespective of religion, irrespective of community, irrespective of their backgrounds, everybody has to respect that the deity, and the deity lays out certain rules of people. So people developed these customs, people on the basis of the knowledge, and they regulated their behaviors, that the behavior that is kind of an interaction with that local forest and local system. So but then when we are looking at Bono Bibi, both in Bangladesh, and this is very strongly present both in Bangladesh as well as in the Indian part of Sundarbans, we see that this is sort of getting converted into a touristic attraction festival, rather than a system of knowledge, which is far deeper and far more important to preserve for us and for us to learn from. Because scientists and the scientists like us, we often have a kind of audacity to feel and think that we know best. Unfortunately, that may not be the case, because we are still in the process of learning. I think it's very important for us to keep learning and keep discovering the kind of knowledge that is already there, instead of trying to replicate knowledges in the laboratories, in our system of sciences. We should try and uncover the kinds of knowledge that already exist. And Bon Bibi is one example which we have studied, and which is fascinating amount of knowledge that is embedded in those rituals, in terms of how to behave with the forest, how to behave with the non-humans, what kind of lines to cross even. Communities feel that they have instituted a little temple, and they say that, well, we will not go beyond this temple at any cost, because we know that that's the territory of forests, of ecology, and that is where the respect comes from. So it enforces people's behavior. It kind of modulates and changes people's behavior automatically. You don't need to really teach them. You don't really need to force them or do anything of that sort. And the other aspect that I would like to indicate here, because my work has been at the intersection of climate change and conservation, which is a very tricky area actually. Now, Sundarban is also a hotspot of climate change impacts, as we all know. And that impact of climate change has been in the form of number of cyclonic events over the past 10-12 years. It has been already declared as the cyclone capital of India. And every time there's a cyclone, there's a massive damage to the mangrove forest. Though they save human population on land, they really save the human population in the cities. But the mangrove, when it gets damaged, it's completely denuded kind of landscape that we see after those events. And not only the large ones, there's a kind of invisible disasters almost every day, invisible hazards almost every day, which I've worked on, and I call them as everyday disasters, which are smaller events, smaller storm surges, cyclonic events, perigean spring tides, and so on. And their impact has been really incriminating on the people and as well as on the ecosystem. Now, these two have been at the forefront of those changes. Now, one aspect that I think no one mentioned really in this connection of conservation of knowledge and conservation of intangible heritage, which I link to knowledge, is the role of economy, and how the economy is kind of shaped around these biosphere reserves, these natural heritage events, and so on. We all know about climate change, and we all have the data on who's causing climate change and how much. People of Sundarbans, indigenous communities all over the world have very little contribution, almost negligible contribution to climate change. However, when it comes to suffering those impacts of climate change, they are the worst ones to suffer. Now, that is where we are missing out. To be really, I really find it kind of strange that we all talk about climate change. We all know who's causing climate change and how it is caused. There is enough data in public domain about the inequality in the level of emissions, in the level of consumption, in the level of production, and so on. But we still kind of push that responsibility towards peoples, towards individuals, towards communities, towards even indigenous communities. So the role of economy, we really have to understand what kind of role economy plays, what kind of role knowledge systems plays, and the knowledge systems very often turn hegemonic, which is rather unfortunate, but where we are all party to that, let's say, crime, that we all think that we are educated, we are trained, we know the best, we know how to conserve, we know how to preserve things. That's where I think I would put my point, that knowledge and economy, and that's where the conflict really lies to me, and kind of towards effective preservation of intangible heritage such as knowledge, and also to preserve natural heritage. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ghosh. I think thank you for bringing it up, the Bon Vivi, that folklore and how it is intricately linked with the conservation and management of Sundarbans from both the countrysides. And also, I think you have already touched upon the second questions, most of the points that we are looking at with nature can be implemented in plans and policies for preservation of nature and natural heritages. So I would like to, if you would like to add a few more things, maybe can you do it in a quick 1 minute, given the paucity of time? So what lessons from communities living in close contact with nature can be implemented in plans and policies for preservation of natural heritage?
I really think that the values and the meanings that local people have developed over time with non-humans, and that non-human includes both flora and fauna, by the way. So that is necessarily missing. I mean, I really would love to see training for tourists instead of training the community. So training the tourist is very important, because tourists who are going into that natural reserve, going to that natural system, socio-ecological system that has survived for so long. I mean, if you go there and blare mics, or if you go there and play music at very high sort of level, if you consume alcohol, for example, now that's what generally tourists tend to do. No, now if there is a possibility of training the tourists to approach the system and how to respect the system and how to be one with that system, to enjoy that system, because each tourist that I have interviewed in the Sundarbans, they have come there to see the tiger. They've not gone there to enjoy that nature, the sense of that quaint, airy, the world's largest mangrove ecosystem. No, they've gone to see, I mean, and it's very difficult to see the tiger in Sundarbans because they are all in the islands and you are on water. So if you've gone with that preconceived idea and intention, you will be disappointed. And when you are disappointed and when you're disillusioned, then you sort of lose interest. So we really have to develop that empathy for tourists and train them. This is just one. So I think the training is required by people who've been kind of city dwellers, people who've been always in the urban areas, instead of the people who live there. They know how to interact with the nature. They have kept this pristine landscape as it is. They have preserved the tigers. We haven't. Because if you go back in Hunter's description, the first description that we had, sorry, there's something happened.
Fine. Can you please go ahead?
All right. Yeah. So in Hunter's description, they've described tigers as pests. And there was a reward for killing tigers, which at that point in time used to be close to 250 rupees in 1911. Just imagine. So, but locals did not sort of see the tigers as pests. It was us who looked at the tigers and described them as pests. Now we are trying to conserve them. So knowledge also has this quaint temporality, right? So I think the training is important for people who are going there with kind of preconceived ideas, whether they're tourists, whether they're corporations, whether they're trying to do some business, whether they're trying to intervene, develop the region, develop infrastructure, anything. So they need to be trained. And that training should come from the local people. So it's a kind of a co-production of knowledge that we are talking about.
Okay, thank you. So it's mostly the first approach is training the tourist rather than the local community who are very much aware of the local systems. So thank you for adding that dimension to it. So now I call up our last panelist today, Mr. Madan Singh Chauhan, Director of World Heritage Archaeological Society, Archaeological Survey of India. So, Mr. Chauhan, given the natural settings that help frame India's cultural World Heritage sites, for example, the Ajanta, Ellora, Bhimbetka, and Taj Mahal, what collaborations and research can be done to conserve their environmental and ecological values? Because we are seeing more and more cultural heritage sites being managed better, but then what about the natural heritage sites? How the environmental ecological values can be incorporated into the research in maintaining these World Heritage sites?
Thank you, Dr. Nehru. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate WII for organizing this wonderful webinar and inviting me for this discussion. And I want just to give a brief, short introduction about the Archaeological Survey of India and its property. Actually, cultural heritage, we are managing 3, 4, or 5 ways. One is the prime properties like World Heritage. Second one is the nationally important monument. Third one is the lower status monument like the state level monuments. And thereafter, those monuments which is regionally significant. So all these 5 categories of monuments are separately owned and controlled and administered by the different administrative bodies like Panchayat, like district administration, and like state government and the ESI, Archaeological Survey of India. As you told that many sites which is very much interconnected with the natural setting. So we have many of the sites which is still connected with the intangible heritage. But equally, there are different sites which are not connected with the intangible. Why? Because the site which was abandoned or which was excavated, we don't have the intangible or other associated culture with it. So that has to be separately managed or researched. And those sites which we have the evidence or which we have the associated evidences, accordingly we have to manage those sites. As you told about the Ajanta and Ellora, like Bhimbetka. So for example, Bhimbetka, we have a local setting over there. And the site itself has a sufficient, very prehistoric site. But along with that, we have the surrounding, the ambience, the villages, the tradition. The traditional art still exists over there. So accordingly, we have to maintain that. And for that, we need to involve the local community. Local community, we don't only just go and tell them to come and see site and preserve this site. We have to give the traditional importance to them. We have to learn from them. We have to become ignorant in front of them. Otherwise, they will not value you. You have to go and sit and discuss them, and accordingly, they value their tradition very much. And they also today, many of the persons from their society has come forward. They are doing government job in the metros, So they knows that this is not the only formula that they sit in a remote area and they only obey the tradition and by avoiding the modern development. So that has to be amicably discussed with them, and then discussed with them, and accordingly signifies that their traditions are very important for protecting and maintaining the property.
Thank you, Mr. Chauhan. See, in connection with this, again, second question I would like to pose to you is, of course, there are vast differences in cultural and natural heritage sites in terms of how they are managed. Until recently, the natural heritage sites are not recognized vastly across Asia. So I would like to ask you, what challenges and opportunities do you anticipate in developing joint management strategies for natural and cultural heritage in Asia Pacific as a whole region? Of course, India is a region with many natural and cultural heritage sites. So what are the opportunities we have in terms of joint management of cultural and natural heritage sites?
I think if we see the history of convention of the World UNESCO Convention, so when you see the beginning of the UNESCO and the World Heritage Sites, so focus, if you see the data, so we will find that the cultural sites are more nominated. So I think this is the main reason behind this is that the department or the government has given more focus on the cultural site earlier, but nowadays we are thinking about it, and government, like recently we had a meeting with the WIA representative, Dr. Suresh was talking with us in a meeting that they want to submit a new proposal for the crater, which was a new from the Indian side. So now I think we need to improve the dialogues. We need to improve the webinar like this, and participation among the department and interdepartmental discussion, so that we can increase this property to be nominated more in numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Madan Chauhan. We heard from vast experiences of the panelists. So, however, given the paucity of time, I would like to quickly kind of open this floor for discussion briefly for 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next session. So I would invite the panelists to pose questions to each other, then we can kind of conclude this session. Is there any questions that the panelists want to get it across to the other panelists? Yes, Dr. Benno, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say to Mr. Ghosh that thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to highlight to all of us really in this meeting that there is a lot that we do not know about climate change and the origins about climate change. So we cannot say we know the data and we know everything, because that is just simply not the case. We have the sun with solar patterns. We only had a solar eruption last week, which was massive. We have the orbit of the planet planet Earth that goes around the sun, which is a trembling orbit, and it's oval-shaped. We don't know why it's trembling, but every time it trembles and the planet Earth goes closer to the sun, it heats, and goes further away, it cools. In addition to that, we have changes in the Earth axis. We also have changes in the axis of Mars and the Moon, and etc. And that, again, it causes the changes of the biomes, and with that, it causes changes of the climate regimes on planet Earth. So there is a lot that we do not know. So, of course, we do know that 2,000 years of deforestation has caused a lot of anthropogenic climate change, and we do know that the massive release of greenhouse gas emission has also caused it. And we know which countries are contributing more to the release of CO2 and CH4 and so on, but we cannot just say that we know everything and that we have all the data, because geologically we can only look back 66 million years, and there is a lot on climate change and climate science that we do not know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Aditya, Ghosh.
May I respond to that?
Please.
Thank you so much for that observation. I fully agree with you that we don't have enough knowledge, because knowledge is always temporal, and with time we grow our knowledge in some ways or the other. And definitely there are a lot more to learn for all of us, and for the scientific community from a natural science perspective. What I meant, and I must clarify it here, is that the kind of emissions that are caused by not only by different countries or by per capita different countries, but also on the level of wealth. We also already have the data that around 100 corporations in the world contribute to 71% of all greenhouse gas emissions. We also have the data that top 20% of the world's population in terms of wealth produces almost 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's what we know. That is, of course, limitation of our knowledge, but that's what we know for today. And we cannot probably wait for a temporarily indefinite period of time to act till the time we know. So we have to start working with, I believe that we have to start working with what information we already have, what information we already have produced, what we already know, instead of course, continuing the search and continuing with the kind of producing more and more knowledge in this domain, but at the same time act on the basis of knowledge that we have already produced and that we already have, instead of waiting for certain time. And that is what I meant, is that the kind of knowledge that we have, we already know the shares of emissions of different kinds of wealth quotients and different kinds of people. And we also know that indigenous people have very little in terms of contribution in terms of emissions and so on. So that is what I meant, if I have clarified that enough. And thank you for bringing that time. Of course, we don't know as much as we should, and that's true for any time or any point in time in history, to be honest. Right from the time of Galileo to the time of to the contemporary times. As we evolve our knowledge, we will continue developing our knowledge, but at the same time, what we know is the only basis that we have to formulate policies today, as of today. And we cannot really, go beyond that at this point in time in terms of practical policy making. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. I appreciate that, your clarification. Yes, thank you. So we are on the same page. And yeah. I have pasted the UNESCO climate science literacy materials into the chat so that everybody can see that. We have already the materials available in 7 Indian languages, and we are producing it into many more languages. So please have a look in the chat, everybody. Thank you very much, Professor Ghosh.
Thank you, Dr. Benno, for putting that up in the chat box. Now that I see Dr. Nayeon also raising her hand. So Nayeon, please, can you want to add something?
Thank you very much. Actually, I just found the question from Dr. Brown, so I just want to answer of that. So it was in terms of definition of culture that I mentioned during the presentation, which separates people from the nature. So I think, yes, it is true that definition of culture makes a distinction between human and natural environments. However, I believe that the idea that all activities created by humans to overcome and survive in the natural environment are culture. And this implies that culture itself is combined with nature. And, actually in Korea, there is an architectural method called 배산임수. And it is an ancient, how can I say, ancestors' wisdoms that says you should live with the mountain behind your house and water in front of your house. And you will find that old Korean houses called, how can I say, have wind pass for the hot summer and heating system called ondol for the winter seasons. So when you look at these landscape, including house, mountain, rivers, you can't easily say that Korean houses are cultural heritage or natural heritage, but they are just like lifestyle, right? So I think this, the definition that I mentioned conveys the idea that, of course, we can make a distinction between human and natural environments, but that culture is created on the basis of the natural environment. And so we need to look at culture and nature in the integrated way, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Neolin, for clarifying this question. With the excellent discussion and excellent opinions from the panelists, I would like to sum it up. So we have seen that how the nature and culture interlinkages shaped the heritage in a whole of the Asia Pacific region, not only Asia Pacific but also the world. So again, some of our panelists have again emphasized the threats being faced by these sites and the importance of increasing the coverage of areas, protected areas, as well as the UNESCO Man and Biosphere program, how it's going to contribute, and also the Dr. Aditya Ghosh has pointed out the folklore traditions in Sundarbans, how it is valued. The local communities are valuing those folklore traditions and reiterating how it's important to preserve these cultures in addition to bringing in policy level changes. And of course, the Director World Heritage from the Archaeological Society Survey of India also emphasized that the institutions need to come together to make it a better management solutions for cultural and natural heritage sites. So it's a complex mix of things. So of course, this webinar is also to kind of emphasize that it's going to be a complex mix of things. So bringing in culture and nature conservations together, it's going to be a challenge, but there is no other way than coming together to having worked not in silos, but in collaboratively to take things forward. So I encourage the audience to post their questions in the chat box that can be forwarded to the speakers, and the speakers, I hope the speakers can get back to you with their answers for that. So thank you everybody for joining us. With that, I conclude this session. I hand it over to Anuranjan for the proceedings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nehru Prabakaran, and a big thank you to all of the panelists who have had a wonderful engagement with us. And I see Dr. Suresh Kumar has a quick comment to make. Dr. Suresh Kumar, sir, you can go ahead.
Yes, sorry, but I just wanted to quickly flag this particular point that has been going on in my head since listening to all the speakers. Here at the Wildlife Institute at the Category 2 Center, since the time that I and Dr. Nehru took over, we've been really trying to figure ways as to how we can better reach out, not only to the sites here in India, but also to other sites. And I see from a few of the points raised by different speakers that there is a lot of lessons from each of the sites that can offer. So I would like to say on behalf of my team at the WI Category 2 Center, we would very likely very soon reach out to, if not all of you, at least a few of you, in how we can at least have some form of exchange of these stories of culture and nature linkages, some great stories. There are some good stories here in India, and I'm sure if these stories from other parts of the world can be shared with the sites and with the communities, I think we are able to strengthen our efforts in the heritage site management, and also bring up this whole idea of this linkage of nature and culture. See, very often when we go down to make people aware of the importance of the heritage sites and on which they are dependent on, people always know about it. They've been part of the system. They know the stories very well. And what they would idealize is that their stories be told elsewhere, that they would, it's a very simple thing, it's a very simple thing. They would like to be acknowledged. And so I have seen this happening across sites. And so I think this is a fantastic medium where, or the platform, the heritage tag some of these sites have. So stories from Philippines and from what Steve Brown presented about the cases in Australia, how we can bridge this together or have these exchanges happening across. So I'm sure the people in these other Asia Pacific regions would be happy to know about how communities here back in India in one of these heritage sites, how they are managing or part of the whole story of culture, nature, the linkages relating to that site. So just to sum up, I along with my team, Dr. Nehru and everybody else at the center, will be very much looking forward to reach out to you with this idea of how we can come together more, and also voicing the same point that Ms. Himalchuli had raised in the opening presentation. So thank you. That was my point.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh Kumar. And in the interest of time, and we'll be moving to the next section of summary soon, but I see that Steve is planning to leave. He's the furthest on the east for us, and he has a long drive home. So Steve, if you're still there, can we all on the meeting? It's been a marathon session. There's been a lot of learning. So everyone on air, do you mind switching our video on for a quick group photo as best we can in this online environment? So I'll take a screen grab of all our cameras on. So those who are online, if you don't mind, if you can just switch your camera on, we would love to see your faces. Thank you so much for being patient, and some people are joining now, so we'll see. But
thank you.
Yes, thank you. So all right, so I'll take a few seconds. I'm just giving maybe 30 seconds more for people to switch the camera on. We will just take a quick screenshot of everyone online. So if those of you online, if you can hear me, please switch your camera on and then hold that smile for about 10 seconds. So here we go. Smile of group 1. All right, we got a group here. All right, so smile of group 2, please switch your cameras on. Smile of group 3, I'm going page by page. A lot of cameras off on this group, but we still see your names and your DPs. So thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. And now I would request Mr. Niraj Kakati, Technical Officer, WIC2C, to kindly summarize this webinar. We have learned a lot and it's a big job, but sir, your stage.
Okay, a very good evening. Greetings to all of you. Good morning as well and good day as well to people from Europe to the Asia Pacific to down under. I'm Niraj and I'll make a very brave attempt to summarize it maybe in about 2 minutes. But we've had a very engaging couple of hours of discussions. I think it's been very enlightening. And we hope to sort of take this forward further in terms of dialogue, discussions, as well as collaborations. But we've heard from absolutely the headquarters in Paris, the World Heritage Center, to regional streams of thought, whether it's South Asia, Southeast Asia, as well as Australia, and very eminent panelists who spoke about issues in terms of whether it is interpretation, whether it is enhancing the environment management capacity of the countries, folklore traditions, as well as in terms of management of sites at very different levels. I think this is something that we have work to do, and there are challenges, but of course, the prospects and opportunities are even higher. I thank you all once again And from our end, at the Wildlife Institute of India Category 2 Center, under the auspices of UNESCO, it was absolutely great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll stay engaged and we will definitely share the recording of this webinar because I'm sure a lot of us had to drift in and out. So we will share the information for all of those online. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Wishing everyone a good night, good morning.
Thank you so much, and I
good,
hope to see you again.
Good afternoon. Hey, Mr. Albisha, nice to see you
Thank
too.
you.
The Central Leadership Highway.
Nice to see you, and I hope to see you again and again.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for your effort.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
You too.
All right, bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Albisha, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you again, and I hope to see you again and again in future.
Yes.
Thank you for your effort. Thank you for coming to India, for the house, for everything. And thank you for UNICEF and also for my colleagues, all participants.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for being
to
with us
everyone.
for this duration of the webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, good day, good morning, depending
Thank
on
you so
your
much.
time zone.
Take
Thank
care
you.
all.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.